Okay, I am Dr. Jerry Wood, and I will introduce myself. I live here in Knoxville. I'm retired city manager from Virginia and been in education now going on 12 years. I moved to Knoxville about 8 years ago to run a campus for a competing institution, King University, just down the street, and recruited, it's probably the first one in there recruiting for the National Lab in Y12. And we actually at that time started a Friday program. Do you work 4 day weeks? Y12 does. So we did that for Y12, a Friday MBA, and I can remember the gentleman that was in charge of education at Y12 said, "I'm going to send you some of the smartest engineers, scientists in the world. We have $6.8 billion to spend on a new uranium processing facility, and they know nothing about business. So you indoctrinate them to business." And that was some fun times back then, and enjoyed it. And interested in your background, my son has a doctorate from Penn State in materials chemistry, and he did his work with glass through Corning, and then was teaching at Penn State for a couple of years and doing some postdoctoral research, and got this wild hair to go to the FBI. And now he's in the DEA. So, but I have 4 children, married, have a house in Virginia, apartment down here. So I'm down here about half the time. During COVID, I was teaching right here on this campus when COVID hit, and I'd gone through two sessions, and COVID hit and sent me home. And so I'm glad to be back. I didn't think I would ever get to teach face-to-face again, but here I am. So we will do this class a lot like in fact, it's set up for an online class. So I didn't make any changes. There was a mistake in how they did this, and actually I've got you into 2 separate groups, and they gave a Jefferson City group and a Knoxville group, and it appeared that it was 2 courses. But when I got to looking at the true 2 courses, mentioned times and nights, and I thought they're both on the same night, so something's wrong here. So somebody actually really messed that up. So we're getting it straightened out. But I want to go over a little bit of logistics. You all have, and they weren't doing this when I taught here in pre-COVID, but now you have your textbooks are provided. And I've gone in and set up all of your homework and all of your exams and all of your cases in McGraw-Hill Connect. The only thing left for you to do is in there are PowerPoints in the modules. I'm losing my voice tonight for some reason. There are PowerPoint modules in the modules and discussion boards. So number 1, do not do the discussion boards. There's still a grade in there for discussion boards, but instead of getting a grade for a discussion board, you'll get that 10% or whatever it is credit for coming to class, and we're going to have some discussions here. I'm not going to be big on lecturing. I used to use PowerPoint slides, but I'm not going to, we're all adults, and I'm not going to torture you and stand up here, sit up here, and click PowerPoints and read them for you. I urge you to do that on your time. You probably will not be staying the full time here. We'll stay as long as we, especially to begin, but we'll be analyzing some cases. I'll divide you into groups, so you'll be a group up here to analyze some cases. I'll divide you guys when we have everybody here, and I'll be giving you some cases. Keep up with your homework in McGraw-Hill. It's worth about 30% of your grade. Your exams, another 40%. Classroom participation, maybe another 20. And we're going to do a project. And I'm not sure exactly, I had in mind how I was going to do this, because when I started out and came in here tonight, I had 10 here and 11 there. So that's obviously going to change. I'm going to have 2 here and probably 18 there, or 19. So I'm not sure how I'm going to handle the projects. They will probably be still individual projects that you turn in. And maybe if some of you need a few extra points, you can make a presentation of your project. It's a costing project. And if you look in the syllabus and in module 1, I have already prepared instructions for you, so you can click on that. We will be discussing that next week in detail. I'm not going to do that tonight because we have so many people absent. Also, I've already prepared an Excel spreadsheet for your project. But what it will be a costing project, and you will develop, and hopefully I've had students when I taught this before that we had a big group of 20, they would actually bring samples in. So we'll discuss this more, but take any type of a household product. I've had people make tables. I've had people make brooms. I've had students make washing detergent. You know, it's up to you. And you will have to do like a 7-page paper explaining this. The instructions are in there, but that paper, at least 4 of the pages, can be the Excel spreadsheet that all you've got to do is plug in numbers. So for instance, if you were going to make bread and sell it, then you would have to go on the internet or Walmart or Target or somewhere, Amazon, and get all the cost involved in making a loaf of bread. So we're going to be, as we go, I want you to think about it. And I'll ask you for your project title the 3rd week. I normally ask for it the 2nd week. So those of you that are here can start thinking about your project and let me know what it is. And we can go from there, and then I can more or less explain. I'll give you a few of the things like the overhead, but you'll have to plug in labor. But as we go week to week, we'll be covering different concepts and different costs in managerial accounting. So we will, when we're covering those, this project will be, if you keep up with it and you start it, it will be a work in progress, and you won't have a lot of work at the end. Now, I did have a student not too long ago wrote me up on the evaluation and said I dumped too much work at the end. They had a final. Well, the final was just on the last 2 chapters, and they had their project. And yeah, it's a lot of work. But remember, I signed it the 1st week, and they waited till the last week when you have to turn it in to do it. So please, please don't do that. Please keep up with your homework. Please take the exams on time. And please come to class. And right now, everybody has a high A in this class. And I want everybody to end up with a high A in this class. So any questions? Has everybody gone on to Canvas and checked their textbook out and everything? So I feel like I'm going to be doing a lot of the same stuff next week, but not in the detail I'm doing it tonight. So, okay. It's going to be short tonight, I can tell you that. So that's the logistics. First thing I suggest you do is read your syllabus and find out what everything's worth. And you'll see that, you know, I have had students that thought, well, the homework is only worth 10% of the total grade, and I don't have to do that all the time, and they missed an A by like 2 points. I won't give you points for missing homework. And it's not that hard. And also, I will tell you, I use the same pool of questions for the homework as I do the exam. The difference is, in the homework, you may have to work a few problems. And when I say work, it's a little bit of work, but you need to spend that time to understand. I know what you really need to know, so may give you a little work on that. But all your exams will be on the same material, but they will be, you won't work any problems or any worksheets. Your exams will be either multiple choice or true false. And I may give you a worksheet, and it's already filled out, and ask you 3 questions about that worksheet. So I'm more interested in you knowing how to use these. Also, as accounting goes, this course, as it should be at an MBA, is set up for you to learn how to use the information. I'm not going to teach you to be an accountant, but in order to use the information, you have to know some basics of what the balance sheet is. And let me ask this, have any of you had any accounting before? That's pretty normal. So if you were an accounting major, this would be about your 5th or 6th accounting course that you took. So that's why I can't expect you to know everything that you learned in 2 semesters of basic, 2 semesters of intermediate, cost accounting, financial accounting, to get to managerial accounting. So that's why I want to teach, it's managerial accounting, and I want you to learn how to use this to make decisions. So I'm going to go over the highlights right now. If you will look in Canvas, in Module 1, the way it was set up for a online course, the PowerPoint slides are in there for chapters 1 and 2. So in the first week in my online course, we cover the first 2 chapters. I'm going to hit the highlights of the first 2 chapters because a lot of this will be on the exam. So I don't know how, can y'all hear me okay? I'm trying to talk a little loud. So does somebody want to tell me the difference between financial accounting and managerial accounting? Has anybody read that yet? Pardon?
Looking to the past versus looking to the future?
Sort of. Managerial is that you're describing managerial. You know, you do look at the past for the future. But
the accounting
One's going to be more internal focused, one will be more external focused.
Exactly. Did you hear that in Jeff City? Financial accounting is focused external. We have lots of rules that we go by. Generally accepted accounting principles. Whereas that is used, and it has to be very uniform, because that is used for your financial reporting that you give to your lending institutions, your taxes, your stockholders. So it has to be consistent in a certain way. Whereas managerial accounting really doesn't go by this GASP, as I call it. Doesn't go by the accounting principles. There are some rules that you need to go by, but managerial accounting is simply used for you to make decisions to manage your business. Now, you've had other courses here. You've had strategic management and finance, or you're going to be having that. But all these should tie together to assist you if you're getting into management. And if you're getting an MBA, obviously that's what you want to do, to assist you in decision making. Can somebody tell me what the functions of have you had management classes, strategic management, or what do you remember what the basic functions of management are? Anybody remember? All right.
Leading the organization, making decisions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you get more of that into strategic management, but the work of management basically is planning, controlling, and decision making. And I tell my students that accounting is the language of business. I also tell them that if you're a manager, you cannot manage what you can't measure. So you have to have some way of measuring your performance. And we use the language of accounting to measure our performance. So what is planning? Somebody want to tell me what they think planning is? That's okay, I'll tell you. It's when you're planning something and you're sitting down and you, if you're, I don't care what you're planning, but you establish, and in business we call it, we're establishing goals. So when we plan our goals. So like you said, that's for the future. That's using accounting information for the future. And also in the planning, you know, we think what the goals are, and then we are very specific as to how we can achieve these goals. Now, that normally involves in business, in your home, in your personal life, if you plan something. If you're planning a party this weekend, you have to have money. So that's where the budget comes in, and that's where the real accounting comes in. Now, what do we mean by controlling? So when we talk about controlling, we're gathering feedback and looking at performance reports. So we planned, we set our goals, we make our budget. Then we, after we implement it, we get some feedback, and we start to get reports on how this works. And then the decision-making comes in. So after you've planned and you've budgeted, and then you really start to implement your plan and controlling it, then the decision-making comes in. And that's when you determine, hey, am I making money? Am I doing the right thing? What should we be doing? You know, if you're in sales, you know, what should we be selling? Automobile industry, you know, they have to look at accounting information and predict what cars they're going to sell. And of course, they lots of times look at weather forecast, you know, they gather all the information they can. And then how do we execute this plan? You know, that's important in accounting. You have to know how much money you have, how it's coming in, how it's going out to execute your business plan. You do that by activities. So in a business, who would use this information? What departments?
Marketing.
Did you say marketing?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. What others?
Operations.
Operation. You've been reading the book, or you're looking at the PowerPoints. Very good. Actually, I thought I was looking for the answer and then we were going to break that down, but that's perfect. You know, every department would use accounting. So like you said, marketing, operations, human resources, every department has its own little budget normally. Especially depending on the size of the business. So we've gone down through there. So in accounting, when I was going through school and working on a doctorate, some of the things that we studied, and you're going to go back and do a little case study on this before the probably the third week, maybe next week, on the accounting and ethics. Can anybody tell me what happened, started about 15 years ago, that just destroyed the accounting world as we know it? You guys probably should, I don't know. Now, Enron. You ever hear Enron and Tyco and what happened? And the big, I mean, the largest accounting firm in the nation, all of the managers went to jail. Enron went bankrupt. Thousands, if not millions of people lost their retirement. And what happened on that, the accountant got so close to the big business that they were letting them do things. And Arthur Andersen was the accounting firm. They actually had offices in Enron's buildings, and they partied together, and there was no real separation like it should be. Thus, they were just turning their heads to things that they were doing. And the sad thing about it is it was on a gray line of being legal or illegal. So it went to court. And like I said, a lot of them went to jail. Most of them just lost their jobs. The company went out of business. So, you know, we're going to do a couple of case studies on situations like that, and ethical behavior, which those of you that's looking at the PowerPoint, you know, that's integrity and credibility. And I think we all know what integrity is. We all know what ethics is. But in accounting, if you'd taken some of the basic accounting courses, one of the first things you learn about accounting information is that it must be accurate, it must be timely, and it must be credible. And you, as an accountant, with this accounting information, there's only two types involved. You're either a producer of the information or you're a user of the information. So if you, as a manager, go to the accounting department and you need some information in order to make a decision, you want it to be credible. You want it to be timely. If you'd had some other accounting, you would hear about a balance sheet. And a balance sheet is nothing more than a picture of your company at any given moment. So if I do a balance sheet, and you'll run into balance sheets, but not too much in this. If I do a balance sheet and I do it today, it changes tomorrow when I pay a bill or I do something like that. It changes, believe me. So that's why it must be, when we say information must be timely, and it must be disclosed and communicated. I know when I've taught basic accounting, one of the things we do as a case is, a manager, if a manager doesn't know how to communicate to the accounting department what he or she wants, then how are they going to get the proper information? So that's why you're in this course, to just learn the basics of how to make decisions and how to relate this information. And the last thing that we didn't have, that's covered in chapter 1, that we didn't have when I was in school, you sort of thought about it, or you should think about it, but this thing now, this corporate social responsibility, that's caused a lot of corporations, Nike, Nestle, you could go down the line, a lot of heartaches because they weren't responsible. When I was the city manager, I'm a retired city manager in Virginia, and before this Enron and this thing came out, my audit report was about 30 pages, and it was all financial. It was all numbers. When Enron and all these rules changed, and Sarbanes-Oxley, we're going to learn about that. When that came about and changed, my audit went from like 30, 40 pages to 140 pages, of which the extra pages had nothing to do with numbers. And it had to do with this ethical behavior. And for example, I got written up that changed in a year, 26 pages of violations that I didn't even know was there. And I was an accounting major. But they were such things as, and this is all covered in accounting now, I did not require my employees to change their passwords at least once a month. I had a room that had a server, a closet that had our server in it, and locked the door, but that wasn't secure enough. So security. And so, if we may do a case on something like that in accounting during this course. And again, this is the longest lecture you will hear is tonight. That's the end of chapter 1. Let's move on to chapter 2. And that's and chapter 1 is just an overview. That's why when I wrote this course, I put the 2 chapters together. We have 11 chapters, 8 weeks. So I tried to group the chapters. So next week we'll do 3, then we'll do 4, and then I think we do 2, and then we do 3, and then 1 and 1. So when we get into some type of cost, we can cover 3 chapters because it's like budgeting, and all those chapters tie together. But in chapter 2, these are the things I'm going to go over are what I want you to concentrate on, because they will be on your exams, and it may just be a true-false question, but if you don't know what each of them are, you're going to miss that true-false question. You must understand cost classifications. And there are 2 basic classifications. Somebody want to tell me what they are? Direct and indirect costs. So what is a direct cost? Materials, labor, yep. Anything that is used specifically. So in your project, whatever you make, if it's, for example, you're going to manufacture a loaf of bread, package it, sell it. One of the most unique projects I've had somebody do is a young lady one time made an organic toothpaste. She brought it to class for her presentation. She even ordered tubes and put that toothpaste into tubes, put labels on it, and gave everyone in there a tube of toothpaste. But you will learn what all it goes into caustic. I also had one lady that went to these shows, and her mother made jewelry. And they never could figure out why they weren't making any money. But they had never sat down and listed their cost and their labor. And there's just certain things, shipping, I mean, just all sorts of things involved in running a business that normally you don't think about, that we're going to think about every one of them in this class. Now, when we talk about direct costs, there are 3 basic categories of direct costs. And what would they be? Anybody in Jeff City know what the 3 basic cost categories would be? Direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Now, what would manufacturing overhead be?
Like when the managers of the labor.
Did you say labor?
Yeah, like managers and the people that direct the labor.
Well, you know, you're correct in that some of your labor could be manufacturing overhead. But when we talk about these categories, you can break them down that way, and we're going to then you break them down even further. But when we're talking about these, we're talking about direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. So the overhead can include labor. So say it's the manager, and I think you said something about manager, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay, that is correct. That would fall in under overhead. In that if you're manufacturing a whole lot of things, for example, Coca-Cola has so many products, overhead would cover all the products, but then they have maybe one line that does nothing but just make Coke, and one that just bottles water. So, you know, we're going to go over that. And when you're preparing financial statements, then you can break that down for managerial accounting. in two ways: product costs, which are direct materials, labor, and overhead. So lots of times the overhead, you can directly use that as a direct cost. For example, electricity could be an overhead cost. We call these mixed costs. Electricity could be an overhead cost, but if you meter the electricity to a certain machine that's just making a certain product, then it's a direct cost for that product. So sort of got a hold of myself in understanding cost classifications. You have variable, fixed, and mixed. So what is a variable cost? And that can be a direct cost or an overhead cost. But what is a variable cost? Can somebody give me an example of a variable cost?
Something that changes based on how much it's used.
Exactly. Exactly. So your materials, what kind of cost do you think that would be? Is that a variable cost?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's a variable cost because a variable cost, normally the more you produce, the more that cost goes up. Now we're going to get into later on why this is important, because as a business, I don't care if you're a service industry or a manufacturer, you must keep up with these costs, because somewhere down the line, we're going to talk about the break-even point. So we add these variable costs, and then we have fixed costs. So what is a fixed cost? What was that?
You're renting a warehouse with rent?
Yes. The best example I can think of. Your rent on a warehouse, your insurance, normally your electricity. So your fixed costs are costs that they're, just remember this, anything is a fixed cost if it's going to stay the same regardless of how many units you produce. So variable, your electricity can go up if you produce more. Your labor can go up if you produce more. Your materials can go up if you produce more. But your insurance is going to stay the same no matter how much you produce. Your rent, your mortgage, it's going to stay the same no matter how much you produce.
What about depreciation of assets for some of your manufacturing equipment? Does that show up as a fixed cost?
Normally, depreciation, we'll get into that, but it can be. They allow you, and of course, that gets over into, normally you only use depreciation, and that's a very good question, in financial accounting. Because, why would you use it in financial accounting? Because that's how you have to report it. And why do you want depreciation? What saves it on your taxes too. You know, you get to deduct it, and it turns into an expense. So they require you to spread it out on some things. So the IRS, when you're doing financial accounting, the depreciation, they give you a chart of normally how long you would depreciate a vehicle, how long you would depreciate a building, computer, you know, all of that. So good question. But once it's depreciated, it turns into an expense, and it could be mixed, it just depends.
Become an expense then.
That's the accounting rules. You depreciate something. So if you had accounting, everything's a credit or a debit. So when you're depreciating something, you depreciate it. So it comes, the best way to say of why it becomes an expense, even though you're depreciating, it does not come off of your books until you turn into something called depreciation expense. So, and then you can completely write it off. And of course, what happens if it doesn't last as long as you thought it would? Or they will allow you to completely write it off, but you have to prove. But that's a completely different aspect of accounting than what we're doing. In managerial accounting, you really don't worry about the depreciation. Now, I know the owners and everybody, they're thinking about depreciation, but in managerial accounting, you're thinking, how long is that machine going to last? Can I get another 2 or 3 years out of it? We're going to get into something called differential analysis, of where you have that computer and it's shot, and you say, can maybe I use it another year? Or if it's a big computer, would I be better off to lease it? Or from the same way, we're producing a part for our equipment, and it takes a lot of money to run that machinery. So would we best to farm it out? Or are we best just to go manufacture it ourselves? When we get into that, be thinking about which you would do and what the ups and downs of them are. But yeah, I think you've got to grasp the fixed, and then you get mixed. And mixed can contain both variable and fixed. And normally the biggest thing are your utilities that fall under mixed. That's electricity. You know, you've got a fixed cost for electricity, but if you use more electricity to produce something, or if you use more natural gas to produce something, that's what changes it, and you don't run into a lot of mixed. And then we have income statements. What are some normal type of income statements? Or normal financial statements, excuse me. The income statement is a financial statement. I meant to ask you, what are some of the financial statements?
Income.
So income statement's a biggie. What's another one?
Balance sheet.
What was that?
Balance sheet.
Oh, yes. Balance sheet's a very big one. Mainly, though, for your external. What else? Cash flow. You know, most people say profit and loss. Not many people say cash flow. Not many students do. That's a good one, because cash flow is actually, if you're in a business, is one of the most important. As city manager, my balance sheet wasn't that important because we didn't pay any taxes. Our income statement wasn't that important because it was coming in very regular. You know, we knew that taxes were going to come in, and water, sewer, all our services we provide. But our most important statement was my cash flow statement. And trying to convince my council, which was the same as a board of directors, did an annual budget, and it was a small budget, small town. We're talking about normally about $12 million. And I'd have $2 or $3 million worth of projects. And invariably, you'd have a newly elected council member pumped up and say, let's do it. Let's do it. And the same in business. You know, you need this piece of equipment. Let's do it. Let's do it. But you got to say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, it's in the budget. Look, you got to, yeah, I've got $2 million in the budget, but I don't have $2 million worth of cash laying there. And I have to study my cash flow to pay the bills because they come due every month. And in lots of businesses, especially in a government, your tax comes in once a year, maybe twice a year. But think of the businesses. Think of Black Friday. Think of the businesses that depend on the holidays. That's when they, you know, maybe 80% of their sales is during the holidays. Now, what's their cash flow statement going to look like? It's not going to look good. So that's why you have to make important decisions as to how you spend the cash. So that's why a cash flow statement is extremely important. Now, when you get into these statements, you use them for decision making. And we're going to be doing, I'll give you some activities in decision making. I mentioned already, got ahead of myself, differential analysis. So, you know, differential analysis, I used to give students a little case to work, and they would have to do a differential analysis. So, for instance, you get a job, you get a new job, and it pays you more, but it's 30 more miles from home. But the hours are 2 hours less a day. So I would make the students, and there was other variables, and I would make the students do a differential analysis and tell me which would be the best for them as per job. So lots of times you think, well, I'm going to make $200 more in a month or $400, but if you got to spend more gas and it takes you time to get there, even though it's 2 hours less a day, but you're driving an hour, traffic, wear and tear, you know. So then you decide. That's the differential analysis. You put all the things about the new job, all the things about the old job, bottom line, which do I do? That's what we do in business. Differential analysis. Do we discontinue a product? Now, we will get into this, and I guarantee you we'll do some exercises on this. You're not making any money on a product, it appears. So you do a differential analysis. So if you're not making any money on a project or product after a couple of years, would you automatically discontinue that product? Show of hands, how many would discontinue that product if you're not making money on it for a couple of years? Okay. Before this course is over, I'm going to change your minds. And I'm going to tell you why, but I'm not going to show you how, because that's a couple chapters down the road with this differential analysis. But you got to think about it. When you do away with that product, you're doing away maybe with some labor, you're doing away with some materials, but you still got this fixed cost. So what if you're do away with the product that's using half of your capacity of your plant? Well, you still got the equipment there. You still got that fixed electricity. You still got the cost of that plant. So you have to take all of this into consideration. It's really mind-boggling, but that's what we're going to be going over in this course. But in decision making, lots of times, like I said, one process of doing it is differential analysis. Then you have something called opportunity, and that's the potential. So you have to analyze that. So you have an opportunity. I used to use an example of gloves. Seems simple, but there was a glove manufacturer, and they got a special order for 2 million pairs of white cotton gloves. And they thought, oh man, this is going to be great. And they took it. What happened? It almost ran them into bankruptcy because they weren't taking care of their, they saw that as a great opportunity, but they didn't have the capacity to handle it. So by producing only those, they were letting their customers go that had been with them for a long time. So that's why I cannot stress enough of these things that we're going to talk about during this 8 weeks. I can't stress enough of how important all of it is into decision making. Or there's sunk cost. A sunk cost, you know, when you're making a decision, you just forget the sunk cost. And that's cost, it's already there. So I've already bought this piece of equipment, and now this is not going to work. This project is not going to work. You know, what I do about it? Well, you just eat it, because those are sunk costs. Just like the word says, they're there. There's not a thing you can do about them, but move on. And the last thing in this chapter that you really must remember that we're going to be going over in detail is relevant cost or irrelevant cost. And I should have pointed that out back when I was talking about the ethics. That was the one thing I kept thinking I'm missing one thing, and that was relevant. So I talked about the different types of costs being timely and on time and clear but I didn't mention, are they relevant or irrelevant? So I just want to throw that term out tonight. We will be going into what costs are relevant and that you really have to consider, or what costs are irrelevant. So I have given you, in an hour's time, like I said, this is the longest lecture you're going to see me do, an overview of chapters 1 and 2. Now, I just got out of a week-long seminar, and I'm going to use you guys as guinea pigs. And how many of you have heard of the term action learning? Have you heard of the term action learning? You guys? What did she do?
About active listening.
Do what now?
Talking about active listening.
Oh, okay. Now, active learning means that, well, statistics show that I've just talked to you. And I purposely didn't use PowerPoints tonight because statistics say if you walk out of here, you might remember 20% of what I told you tonight. Had I used a visual aid or a PowerPoint, you might remember 50% of what I went over because you could see it. And so on. But active learning, you actually get involved and you do it and you look stuff up for yourself and you study cases. An MBA from Harvard is nothing more than case studies and writing. Case studies and writing, case studies and writing. We're not Harvard, so we're going to do some case studies in accounting. Much harder to do, but we're going to do them. But we're going to participate more in active learning. Now, I wish the groups were more equal. But before well, I don't know if they'll get it done now, but we are going to work this out till we alternate nights. One night, the professor will be in Jefferson City, broadcasting back to you. The next night to be here. And I don't know if anybody thought of that. I gave them the idea and I think they're going to do it because from experience here, normally it's much larger Jefferson City and I just like to be there some with them. So like I said, I'm not going to go over all this information I did tonight, just to want you to think about how much you would remember because I gave you what I consider a long, boring lecture. In my full-time job, I teach strictly online, but I've been instructed that they will whack it. They're going to be checking it, but when I'm developing an online course and I put in videos as a lecture, 6 to 8 minutes is as long as I can put in there for a module. If I was teaching like I'm teaching you guys, on our main campus in Kentucky, 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes lecture maximum is what they're going to start requiring because they're implementing this on an experimental basis. I've been doing a lot of it for 10 years. When I started out 11, 12 years ago in accounting, I used the PowerPoints and I would lecture for 2.5 hours because I thought that's the way it's supposed to be. And I would realize that I lost you after about 20, 30 minutes, but I still hadn't covered the materials. And when I went to college, that's the way it was. Of course, there was no computers, no cell phones or anything like that. So, we just sat there and went to sleep, until they woke us up. So this is going to be an active class. We're going to do lots of breaking out into probably never stay the whole time, but we're going to work. And I'm going to give you real life examples to look up on your computers. So everybody bring their computers with them. Going to give you real live examples and things to do and some groups. Y'all be working in groups and making decisions. I'll give you some cases and you got to come back and make a decision and explain. I'll give you 15, 20 minutes to go over it and you have to come back and make a presentation to the class of why you made that decision and how you arrived at that decision. And we'll do the same here. Again, are there any questions? Have I missed anything? Yes.
Our due dates on Canva, they all will start like in August 10, August 9. Is it from the online course from the summer? Or
evidently you're too far from the microphone. We'll have to work on that. I heard something about homework but
I'll move here. Hopefully that'll help. So some due dates on Canva, they are like for August 9, August 10. Is that going to change or is it still going to stay the same and we just need to figure out?
That's going to change. I changed some of them this afternoon. Just didn't have time to change it. Again, I didn't find out until last week. This was really messed up that this was a face-to-face class. I was in meetings all last week, and I didn't realize that this was like this until I discovered it. Carson-Newman didn't know it till I told him. I mean, that nobody had caught it the way it was set up. So actually, if you look on there, I think I may have put an announcement on one of them or both of them. But I did change the dates. So basically, and I'm not a stickler on dates, but I do urge you to keep up with homework. So don't worry about those due dates unless it's the exam. You'll have a week to complete the exams. So if you come up with something about the dates, but the homework will be, you should have it done on chapters 1 and 2 by the time we meet next week. So we'll go over the material and then you have all week to get the homework done.
Okay, right now I think for homework for chapter 1 and 2, the due date is tonight. Is that correct? Or
the homework, if you've already done it, that's great, but it will not be due. And I'm not going to take off. You know, my wife says I should. She's a former college professor, but you will regret it if you get behind on it. So try to meet the due dates. But so after we go over the material, then next week, homework for chapters 1 and 2. I think the first exam is week 3. I'll put the exam on there. The first part of week 3, you'll have all week to do it, and it'll be due the next. So, and I've got it worked out. So don't really get hung up on the dates. I think I got them all changed just right before I came down here.
okay, thank you. It's just some professors like very strict with dates, and then we don't want to miss them, but they are all over.
Well, I used to be, and these are really different times, different situations. I can remember times there were no students like you, and you know the athletes coming back, and you know the athletes are a lot more intelligent now than they were when I went to school at Marshall University. You know, we had the Randy Mosses and those, and they just were there. I mean, now we have students. You know, I have a student that's finishing up his second master's right now, and just used up his eligibility. So, you know, and I know you've got things that, you know, meets and things you have to do. So if just about everybody, well, everybody that wasn't here contacted me and said they were going to, you know, they were soccer. So just communicate with me in a syllabus. You have my phone number, you have my text. Just text me, phone number me. I try to check my email every day. You know, if you run into a problem, I'm not one of those that's going to punish you. I want you to learn. I want everybody to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, though. Okay, you're dismissed for the night. Don't expect to get out quite this early every night, and you'll have to probably listen to a little bit of what I said. No lecture like this, but I may have to answer some questions or explain something to the ones that are not here, but I've sent them all emails, and I think they know what to do, so I think we got all the logistics covered. But be thinking about your project. Read the instructions and be thinking about what your project to be.